Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast. I'm your host, Chance, and it's an honor to once again bring you up to speed with the cutting edge of holistic wisdom for your mind, body, and spirit. The tripartite nature of our being seems to be a widely accepted conceptualization that we're spirits having a physical human experience through the interface of our mind. But generally speaking, the understanding of the components of our existence tends to stop there. Within that mind, body, and spirit system, it's easy to comprehend that the biological body has an anatomy made of many parts working in seamless unison. And longtime listeners will be familiar with the idea of the human biofield also, an electromagnetic plasma flow that regulates our memories and emotions with its own discernible and distinct centers. And although the metaphor gets a little fuzzy in the comparison of mind and spirit, and which one of the two would include the biofield, today we ask the question, does our mind itself have a similar menagerie of coexistent components, merging into and out of the psychic spotlight as needed? Is the voice in your head that tells you that you suck the same voice that tells you how much you love your child? And just how many characters might there be swarming about in our InnerVerse? And most importantly, are all of them us? Or are there some unwelcome visitors hanging around? Here to help us understand these vast questions is our guest for today, Robert Falconer. Bob has been actively learning and practicing at the frontiers of psychological therapies for longer than I've been alive, having studied almost every form of psychotherapy known to mankind. Bob has done the rigorous field testing to discern what works and what's bunk, and for the last decade or so, he's devoted himself to full-time work with the internal family systems modality, and has become an innovator and revealer of deeper levels of nuance and efficacy for the IFS community of practitioners and patients. Bob's recently published a new book called The Others Within Us, Internal Family Systems, Porous Mind, and Spirit Possession, an encyclopedic tome meant to provide practitioners and researchers with the full scope of Bob's conclusions about the psychic domain. As a fellow student of psychology and the healing power of mental spiritual harmony, I'm excited to learn more about Bob's clinical research and advanced theories, especially in the realm of spirit possession. So check the show notes for links to Bob's website, the new book, and all the ways you can support InnerVerse. Let's do it. Everyone, please send out a burst of welcoming gratitude energy for our guest, the Peak Professor of IFS and Crackerjack Defender against Demonic Attack, Robert Falconer. Thanks for being here, man, and welcome to the InnerVerse.
Oh, thank you. That's a hell of an introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
Well, I'm doing my job then. Got to get them hyped up at the beginning. So, Bob, if you want to introduce yourself or maybe even, take us through your own path. I gathered how your own need for healing was really what directed you through life and to the eventual practice of IFS. Could you introduce us more to how you got to this chair today?
Okay. Well, first thing is I'm a certified old fart. I just turned 76 recently, so I've been at this a while. And I did get into this because I desperately needed healing myself. I came from a family of extreme abuse. My father and mother were both addicts. Mom wore prescription pills. Dad, she was a binge drinker. Dad was a stone alcoholic. A six-pack a day did not count as drinking in his book. That was just baseline, and often a lot more. And he constantly molested me and my older brother. He also beat us. I was beaten unconscious quite a few times. And he had his gay child molesting lovers or partners in crime living in the house often. So they also raped and beat me and my brother. Mom was institutionalized a few times when I was still at home. When we were teenagers, my brother, who was almost 2 years older than me, killed himself. My father was murdered when I was 21. I was over 1,000 miles away, lots of witnesses. It wasn't me. The crime is still unsolved. So I had a few problems. And I still have some, but I would say that now I'm primarily a man of joy, and I have deep, loving relationships in my life, and I feel that I have worked that's meaningful and helps relieve the suffering on the planet.
And yeah, man, you look really good for 76. There's a thing about as people age that, like, in my opinion, they kind of take on the appearance that either they deserve or just fits their, their internal dissonance. And I've met a lot of people a decade younger than you that look way older than you. So you must be doing something right.
Right. Yeah, I think people become, if they don't do their inner work, they become more and more transparent. For example, this is gross, but why not? You can always edit it out. My mother, toward the end of her life, she wouldn't talk. She hated almost everybody. She became obsessed with her bowel movements. And she would give herself a dozen or more enemas every day. And I thought, lady, you could put a fire hose up there and you wouldn't wash out what you need to clean up. But not the kindest thought I've ever had. But toward the end of her life, she just became really, really, really mean. And everybody saw it. She couldn't conceal it anymore. So anyway, I was headed down the path to severe alcoholism in high school. I was drinking, binge drinking, real bad. I was on that line. And then in 1967, I met LSD, and she and I consummated our love relationship that year. And meeting LSD and the other psychedelics just derailed that addiction train for me. And I've done a lot of psychedelics, not a lot, but over 200 trips. And I've guided about that many people. So that sort of got me off the self-destruct train. And then there were all these ways I tried to heal myself. All these different kinds of therapy. Some of them were very damaging. And the ones that seemed to work best were all parts work model, based on the idea that we got wounded children inside and other parts. We're all multiple personalities. And that's actually good news. It's healthy. If you look at AI now, they all know that for a computer to function well, it has to be made up of relatively encapsulated subroutines that are sparsely interlinked with each other. I think our minds are like that too. But in us, these encapsulated subroutines look like wounded children or other parts, and it's actually best if we treat them as full subpersonalities. They respond to that respect better. Anyway, there are many, many, many kinds of therapy that recognize this. This is not a new idea. It goes all the way back to Plato, at least. But the ones I focused on were Gestalt therapy at the Esalen Institute. Been there many, many times. Ego state therapy, which the Jack and Helen Watkins, voice dialogue, psychosynthesis. Pia Melody developed something she called post-induction therapy. And she primarily worked with addicts. Amazing woman. And then, I guess maybe 20 years ago, I discovered IFS. And I think it's the most potent and the most respectful of all of these modalities. And I used to think respectful people tended to be sort of wimpy or weak. And I think I had that absolutely wrong. I think it is so potent because it is so respectful. And it respects all the parts of us and doesn't try and boss or push parts around. So as we go inside, we discover these parts. They're all valuable. A lot of them look terrible when you first meet them because they're carrying all these burdens. A good example of this would be a suicidal part. And I had suicidal parts. I often wanted to suicide like my brother. In IFS, we view suicidal parts. They're last-ditch defenders. And usually when you go to one, you ask it, why are you doing that? And they say something like, well, if the pain gets just overwhelming and absolutely unbearable, I'm here. I can take him out. I'll save him. That's not some enemy. That's a cornered protector who's really, really struggling to do something important. And usually the next thing we'll say to a suicidal part is, if we could get him out of the pain without you having to kill the body, would you be interested? And they almost always say the same thing. They say, yeah, I'd love it if you can, but you can't do that. And then we just say, hey, how about as an experiment, giving us a chance to prove to you that we can help the parts unburden all that pain they've been carrying all these years, and then you'll be free too. So that's an example of the respectful nature of IFS. It's very different than many traditional therapies.
Yeah, there's a lot to zero in on what you've been talking about, but I was really curious about you mentioning that this type of like parts work goes back as far as Plato. Can you expand on that?
Okay, definitely. They seem to accept it as sort of like so obvious it didn't deserve debate. In one dialogue, Socrates is talking to one of the other guys, and they say, oh, parts made up of mind. And they say, this is obvious. The very fact that we could have a debate in our head, one part of us wanting to do something, the other part saying, no, don't you do it, that shows we're made up of parts. And they just go, yeah, that's obvious. And they go on to talking about something else. So, I think it was sort of a basic understanding. Some people I don't know if this is true. I don't read any ancient Greek. I've studied a lot, but I'm not really a scholar in this field. Some people have even said Plato's Republic, with its 3 categories of citizens and this whole structure, is a model of the human mind, showing the parts work structure of the human mind and how the different parts should interrelate with each other.
Yeah, I have a good friend that does research along those lines, trying to see what kind of models might be encapsulated in Plato and other ancient Greek philosophers. And he likes the model of the Enneagram as the basic componentry of a mind, 1 through 9, the qualities of number rather than numbers as quantity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The Daoists had a multiple model of mind, the Hun and the Po. And most of them, they're 10 souls. Some of them, they're hundreds in the various systems. But it's an idea that the modern West finds especially repulsive and keeps burying over and over and over again. It's hard on people's egos. Hey, our planet is not the center of the universe. Hey, we're not this special species that everything revolves around. Hey, we're not even masters in our own head. It's another step on that trajectory of making humans a little less arrogant.
And if we can recognize that our internal world is made up of parts, it only seems reasonable that we ourselves are a part of something else, almost like, we're a psychic fragment of God or a larger mind or entity.
Definitely. And as you work with people, their parts have parts. Well, there's one other part I need to get in here before we start going into the weirder thing. Dick discovered that people had all these parts. They were often fighting with each other. Most people go around the planet in a state of internal civil war, burning up most of their energy fighting themselves. And so the sort of goal of IFS, we don't want to get rid of any of these parts. They're all valuable. They're all good. They all have energy and intelligence and power. We just want to turn the internal civil war into like an orchestra or a jazz band, or whatever, sports team, whatever your model of cooperation where the sum is greater than the separate parts. But as he went in there and met all these parts in people's systems, many of the people would say to him, hey, there's something in here that's not a part like the rest. And he'd ask him, who is that? They'd say, oh, that's myself. That's who I really am. And so he just came to call it self with a capital S. Self is always the witness. It's the eyes through which the world is seen by that person. And that, Dick has come to believe that this discovery of self is the most important thing he's discovered in IFS. And the healing in IFS occurs when you can help people develop a good, warm, two-way relationship between their parts and their self, not between them and the therapist. The healing power is within the client. This is another example of the respectful nature of IFS, and I think makes it very powerful. So this self clearly, if you start exploring it and pushing at it, has spiritual religious overtones pretty quickly. But the other thing he said, which was so important to guys like me, and for much of my career, I worked with other men like me. And there's an old sort of, it's too sad to be a joke, but something therapists say, women come to therapy, men go to prison. That's too true for it to be really funny. But many of the guys with histories like mine who I worked with, what Dick said is this self, no matter what happens to you, it can't be damaged or even dirty. It's like there could be this huge storm, mudslides, your house gets blown away, trees are over, no power, all of that. But when the clouds part, the sun is there. It's not even dirty. It's definitely not damaged. And this self is who you really are. The sun is who you really are. And for me, and most of the guys like me, we've been told all along, you're badly damaged. Best you could expect, some miserable little second-rate life. Take a lot of meds, shut up. And Dick comes along and says, no, that's all crap. Who you really are is absolutely undamaged. And that's an incredible message of hope and power for people who were really, really trashed when they were kids.
I think so too. That's, in my opinion, all the effective modalities. Biofield tuning is the one I do. They revolve around that core principle that the self is already whole, already perfect, already complete. There's nothing to heal. You already have all of your infinite potential remains infinite, and it's just about unlimiting your access to that infinite potential or that loving, kind witness. And you're talking about Richard Schwartz, right? The founder of Internal Family Systems.
Yep.
I think for the people new to it, we've only talked about it really once on the show before. It'd be really good to describe what this modality, I think people are getting a flavor for it, but like how it works, how it came about, what it's like to go through a session and all that.
Okay. Dick, everybody calls him Dick. He discovered, or I don't think he would say invented, IFS about 40 years ago. And he quit. He was a professor of family therapy, family systems therapy. And he quit his tenured position and has spent his life since then traveling all over the country and the world, giving lectures and workshops and talks. And it's now, just in the past, few years, it's become ridiculously popular. I mean, you can't get in the trainings, everything's, but I've been doing it a long time, so that wasn't an issue for me. But he started, as a family therapist, and they believed that if you reorganize the family into healthy patterns, everybody in the family would be better, feel better, and they'd stop their dysfunctional behaviors. And he tested this. He did a series of tests with families that had children with eating disorders, bulimics primarily, which means somebody who binges and then pukes. eats a whole 5-pound bag of chocolate and then throws it all up, and does that a lot. And so he rearranged all these families, and as he puts it, the children didn't realize they'd been cured. They kept doing the behaviors. So he got curious about what was going on in them, and he started asking them questions. And he had believed you don't ever need to go inside somebody's head. You can just organize these external systems. And so they started talking about, this part of me wants to eat, this part of me is disgusted, and how they would fight, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then he had this idea, oh, maybe I could apply the tools of family therapy and how we reorganize these systems so they're less hostile inside a person. And that's what he started doing. And it started working. And then another huge step in, one thing he says, which I think tells you a lot about the state of therapy in the modern world. He said one of his huge advantages is he had no training in intrapsychic therapy. So he said, I didn't have to get rid of a whole bunch of ideas that were wrong. But anyway, he's working along, and there's this woman who not only is binging and purging, but she's also cutting herself. Many patients cut themselves. They just slice up their arms, or, you know, and the standard belief, and I think it's usually true, is that they find that the physical pain is an immense relief from their emotional pain. But anyway, he decided, well, this is just one part of her cutting. Other parts hate it. I'm going to team up with the parts who hate the cutting and get her to agree to stop. So one day he set a whole afternoon aside, and he and this lady and the part of her who hated the cutting badgered and harangued and argued with the part that did the cutting until it finally agreed, okay, I won't cut her. Give you 1 week until our next therapy session. So the next day, next week, Dick's feeling, I got this one. He opens up the door, and there's the woman, and now she has a huge gash down her face. The parts escalated a lot. And he started getting tears in his eyes, and he sort of collapsed back on the couch. And he said, oh my God, I can't win this battle. And the part in that woman said to him, I don't want to win this battle either. And Dick was shocked, and he listened, and he started having a respectful conversation with this part. Oh, well, then why do you do this? What are you doing? And so he developed a respectful relationship with this. There was a protective part of this person. And then from that place of respect and acceptance, was able to work with it. And he considers that moment when he just fell back and went, I can't win here. that was a real birth moment in his attitudes toward the inner world. I'll just go a little further here, I think, be a good idea. In IFS, we think there are two basic kind of parts. They're protectors and exiles. This cutting part was a protector. It did stuff to stop the emotional pain or prevent emotional pain. And then there are other parts who we call exiles, who are usually much younger, who carry the emotional pain. And that would be like the part of me that held the memories of being raped and beaten. And then there were other parts of me who were more typically adolescent-like, who got tough and became a bully and became hard, was obnoxious to people and all that kind of stuff. So that's the basic two levels. And protectors are divided into two classes, managers and firefighters, we call them. Managers are proactive. They try and prevent that exile from ever being triggered in the first place. And they're typically socially acceptable. Like a workaholic would be a typical manager, a perfectionist, an inner critic, all that kind of stuff. And then the firefighters come up when what the manager was doing doesn't work anymore. All that volcanic emotion is starting to come up from those hurt young parts. And the firefighter goes, I'm going to put out that fire. I don't care about collateral damage. I don't care what the hell happens. I'm stopping that emotional pain now. And managers and firefighters, they don't tend to like each other too well, but they're actually both trying to protect or contain usually the same core emotional pains.
So in this modality, you're talking about speaking with parts of self. I've experienced a little bit of IFS myself, so I have an idea of how it goes, but what's the method for, like, how easy is it to just talk to a part of somebody who maybe has never experienced this before on the receiving end?
Usually it's very easy. I don't work with kids, but they get it right away usually. Oh, you want to talk to the part of me that wants to eat the whole thing of candy? Oh. It's usually quite easy, and sometimes people have this intellectual part who wants to figure everything out. And, there'll be these other ones. Some people don't like the word part, so don't fight them. Just, okay, the aspect of you who wants, or there's no need to fight and insist on a language or teach people unless people, now the place I'm in, most people come to me for advanced work, so I don't deal with very many beginners anymore. But there's no need to, when I was working with beginners, I would never explain what I was doing to them unless they asked. There's really no need. They learn by doing.
And for the person on the receiving end of the therapy, there's also like a visual component in a sense, like an imaginal component.
Sometimes, yeah, very often. This is IFS therapy is a lot like Jungian active imagination in a way. Or some people say it's sort of like dreaming while you're awake. Most people, maybe 80%, when they go and talk to a part, they get some kind of visual image. Dick never sees a visual image in his inner world. Never. He hears voices and senses resonance. Other people feel them in their bodies. Eugene Genlin's focusing method, he talked about the felt sense. People would get a felt sense of a certain situation somewhere in the core of their body, and he would work with that. So some people hear him, some people see him, some people have a felt sense. Sometimes it's almost 100% emotional, like there's some part and it just comes up as terror. So people are different. They have, I think of it as some parts have different languages.
And do you think that the parts have any kind of like energetic existence in a field sense, like in the person's auric field or something like that? Because I do this thing called Biofield tuning I've referenced once or twice. I essentially, using a tuning fork, I comb somebody's energy field from the edge of it about 6 feet away in towards their body and look for pockets of stagnant or compartmentalized energy that represent repressed emotion or limiting beliefs, things like that. And whenever my fork goes over it, based on where it's at, there's an anatomy to your energy field. I can know what kind of thing it is. And when I say to the client, and like this type of experience at around this age, they always have something immediately come to mind, even if they don't at first recognize how it connects to what I was saying. It's as if there's an actual energy that is that memory that's there and readily accessible. And when you're talking about these self parts, it sounds like it's the same way, that just as soon as they look for it, based on your prompting, it's just readily there. The answer populates into their mind. They don't even have to think about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If people are thinking about it and making stuff up, it's usually not real. most of the people are really surprised by the stuff that comes up inside them, and that's a good sign. If you're inventing something, you're not too surprised by it. Yeah, I don't. I've tried to make it a discipline for myself to stay focused in the spirit of radical pragmatism. I want to stay focused on what works. What's going to help this suffering individual in front of me feel better? And so I've tried to stay, I can't resist them often, but at least I've made an effort to stay away from these more theoretical questions. I've come to believe that these parts definitely have some kind of independent existence. And they are, in many senses, a full personality. I think, now that's quite theoretical. I think what we can say with a lot more confidence, if you treat the parts as though they were full spectrum personalities, you will get much better results in therapy.
The same,
that's measurable. Quite, at least subjectively, you can get a sense of that quite easily.
And then leading to a big part of the subject matter of your book, the same can be said about what you might consider spirit possession or entity attachment, that the therapists that treat those as if they're real and work with them as such, like Dr. Thomas Zenser is a good example, that they have much better results than the people that want to just repress that and call it a symptom and shut the door on it or medicate it away.
Yeah. And yet, in the West, we are so wedded to our ideology. We cause people immense suffering in the name of that. I've met Tom a couple times and really like him and respect him. And he was a real pioneer, and he was ridiculed and made fun of and shunned his whole career. But he stayed with what he thought was real, and he didn't waffle. And he said, and it was immense courage. And he's a Midwestern gentleman, quiet, neat, soft-spoken. You wouldn't expect this courageous pioneer, or I didn't expect a courageous pioneer to look so civilized and mild-mannered.
Yeah, I had him on the show, I think, last year. It was one of my favorite interviews I've ever had the honor of doing, because he's kind of at the end of the career path in terms of age, and that was a profound episode. His book, Soul-Centered Healing, was really informative to my entire worldview, at least on the psychic realm. And in my personal practice, occasionally the most effective way to resolve a situation is to look at it as an ego state or a self part, as an independent thing that needs to be communicated with directly, or help the client, walk the client through communicating with it directly. So I kind of have a mixed martial arts approach, and that's why I'm so keen to learn more about your personal discoveries in this field that you're bringing forward in the book. So I might be able to see what works really well.
The basic thing in the IFS model is you got these protectors, and then you have these exiles. And it's very tempting, if you sense an exile, this hurt little kid, you want to rush right in there and help it. That's not good, because the protectors will get pissed off because they'll think you disrespected them and all their work. So in IFS, we want to go to the protectors first, get their permission, then go to the exiles, witness their suffering, get them out of where they've been stuck in the past, help them unload, unburden all the beliefs and extreme emotions and energies they took on when they were being hurt. And then we go to the protectors and say, did we do okay? And now, are you ready to shift? Now, are you ready maybe to stop drinking or not be so actively suicidal or whatever it is, you know? So it's a very respectful flow through the whole system. Uh-oh, you froze.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is the experiences that are most difficult for us to process or that need to be repressed for us to feel safe or okay, they can constitute an entire split off psychic being that exists in a mental realm separate from reality that is basically stuck in the very time and place and experience that is being repressed actively by the main personality or the protector personalities. And so with that, it's not just what is hard about that time that is kind of caught in that loop and stuck there, but also sometimes good aspects of ourself from that time and age are rolled up in the package of like your 4-year-old self or your 8-year-old self, right?
Definitely. Every part has great gifts when it's unburdened. And the parts of us who experience the most pain are often the most tender, the most sensitive, the most loving parts of us. And all of that tenderness, sensitivity, and love get exiled too when we have to shut them away.
So what are unattached burdens? This is the terminology specific to IFS.
Right. Well, let me back up just a little bit. So as you go into somebody's system, the first thing you usually meet's the protectors. Then when you get them to agree with you and help you out, you can go down and meet the exiles they've been protecting and start healing them and getting all the burdens off of them. And the burdens would be the beliefs, extreme emotions, all that kind of stuff. And then if you keep going down, things start getting weirder and weirder. It's like you're going to the antipodes of the mind and you're starting to discover platypuses and kangaroos and all kinds of weird stuff. The first thing people usually discover is what's called legacy burden. And all of these things we're going to be talking about now are experiences and burdens that are not from the person's own lifetime. They're not part of their personal life history. They come from somewhere else. Now, I'm starting with legacy burdens because there's scientific evidence behind them now. The most famous legacy burden is the Holocaust survivors. The children and grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors have certain identifiable syndromes that are a result of their parents or grandparents' trauma. And there's a woman named Rachel Yehuda who's published over 500 peer-reviewed scientific articles about the changes in the neurochemistry in these people. I mean, it's really heavily demonstrated. But still, people denied it. You know, this doesn't fit with what was the predominant view of mind, that we're born with this blank slate, you know, and well, so this brilliant man, Dr. Diaz in Atlanta, got an idea of an experiment to test this. And he and an MD from Harvard, Wrestler with an R, not with a W, the Diaz Wrestler experiment, he decided here's how he could test it. Because Diaz had noticed that in the Hispanic slums in Atlanta, mental illness and addiction ran in families. And he thought, well, maybe there could be something more than just behavioral transmission. Because this has been known for a long time. A lot of times in alcoholic families, there's one generation is drinkers, next generation are teetotalers, no alcohol at all. Then the next generation is drinkers again. So it's not direct behavioral transmission. Okay, so he came up with this, I think, brilliant experiment. He got male rats and he exposed them to a smell, which is sort of pleasant. It's sort of like almonds or something like almonds. And he exposed them to this and paired it with a shock. until they got a startle response just to this smell. Then he took sperm from the male rats and he impregnated female rats with that sperm. Now, these female rats never met the male rat. They have never smelled this chemical. When the pups were born from those female rats, they had the startle response to this chemical. Now, this, according to how evolution and inheritance was understood at the time, this was absolutely impossible. But it happens. And this experiment has been replicated over and over again in a lot of different varieties. And the children of the children also have this startle response. So it gets into the lineage. There's the whole science of epigenetics now. So this is hard science. This isn't really open to debate by well, I guess you can debate anything, but this is very well accepted. So legacy burdens exist.
Let me add something to the rat question too, because I want to just paint the picture a little bigger, even in experiments with rats, which I don't condone, by the way, where they teach a rat to run a maze and then systematically destroy parts of its brain and it can still run the maze, even to the point where there's not even much of a brain left. So the point being that memory is not something that neuroscientists have ever found, or in my opinion, will ever find in some sort of cellular filing cabinet in the brain, that holds the record of what happened at this time in these cells or something, or neurons. And that being applied to, understanding memory as something more energetic or spiritual or beyond the physical, then that is a much easier to, marry that to the idea that you're talking about of these legacy burdens and types of ancestral memory trauma patterns getting passed forward, that there doesn't even need to be a physical component to it.
No, and you don't need any intellectual comprehension. I mean, the rats obviously didn't know what happened to the sperm donor they never met. So people can be affected by a great aunt who had all this trauma, not know anything about her and never have met her and all that kind of stuff. It does happen. And there's overwhelming evidence that this is true, even though many, many people still don't want to believe it. So that's step one. So we're just that's putting our toe in the waters of weirdness. There are also things, if you keep going deeper and deeper into people's minds, that don't seem to have any relationship to their ancestors or lineage either. And they still can be in people and have very, very profound effects for good or evil. And this idea drives people up the wall and has gotten me, for many years, I was sort of exiled from the IFS community. Even though they know it's true, they would say, we don't want to talk about this until the advanced trainings because people will think we're weird. And I said, well, I'll just go out a little more and then I'll talk about the case that got me doing this. So there are these things in there that aren't part of us. They're not part of our ancestors, and they can still have immense impact on who we are. And my undergraduate degree and a little bit of graduate work's in anthropology. And they talk about spirit possession all the time. Spirit possession is a basic biopsychological dynamic. It's one of the most widely spread phenomena across all these different cultures, every era of history. And it can have profound effects on people for good or for ill. I mean, it works both ways. It both helps people tremendously and destroys them. Now, whatever we make of that metaphor of calling it spirit possession, that doesn't really matter to me very much. What does matter is something that we have huge evidence of it's occurring all over the planet for thousands and thousands of years. It's really important to human well-being. It's worth our study. I mean, to me, it's almost like a no-brainer. a duh. This is pretty much everywhere and it has huge impact. We ought to study it, even if you find it like ideologically repulsive. And I think the spirit metaphor thing is, we can just hold that as a metaphor, a commonly used metaphor to describe these types of experience. So now I want to go, I think, to the case that got me interested in this. I had been, I'd had all the levels of training. I assisted Dick all over the world. I've taught IFS all over the world, mostly online. And I've been part of 20-something of the official trainings. I've been on the staff. And in one of the little trainings, one of the things we do is we have these groups of 3 participants and someone like me. One of them will be the therapist, one will be a client, one will be observer. And we're training them hands-on supervision in how to do IFS. And this guy was working with this woman and she had this thing in her. And I was getting convinced it wasn't a part. It was one of these UB things. And they'd had no training in this. And he was getting frustrated. So I said to him, would it be okay with you if I took over this session? I think this is something you haven't had any training in. And he was very relieved. He said, please. And what was going on in that woman was she had a voice that seemed like an internal critic, which is a part pretty much everybody has. But it was meaner than hell. And it appeared to her when she saw it as a bloodshot eyeball. And then as she looked at it more, it also seemed to have legs. And it just told her, you're miserable. Everything you do is horrible. You're ugly. You're fat. On everything, negative, negative, negative. Internal critics, when they're parts, they always have some good intention. Like if it's telling someone you're stupid, well, often one good intention might be, well, if I tell her that enough, she won't take risks and get hurt. So something like that. So I just went in and started working with this woman. Ask that thing, why is it telling you this? What's its intention? And it just kept nasty. It was just nasty. There was no good intention in there. I just want to make her feel bad. What's good about making her feel bad? Well, then, just on and on. So I finally said, that's the first thing you look for, one of these UBs, unattached burdens, or spirits or entities or whatever the hell you want to call it. So the next thing is just asking it, are you a part? I just told her, ask it, are you a part of me? They don't seem to be able to lie about this for some reason. They lie about everything else, but this one, they don't seem to be able to point blank lie. And it tried to avoid the question. I don't want to answer that. You're an idiot. It wouldn't make any difference. On and on. So I just kept saying, go ahead, ask it again. Are you a part of me? Then it roared at me through her. You're supposed to be a teacher. That's a really stupid question. Don't you have anything smarter to ask? And I laughed and I said, oh, it may be stupid, but it's simple. Are you a part of her? And this went on for a while more. And then it said, no, I'm not a part of her. I'm a much more powerful and beautiful being. And I'm going to crush you like a worm the same way I'm going to crush her. That's quite a typical UB attitude. And we were able to move it out using very simple, just surround it with light, tell it it's got to go, make sure all your parts feel safe. We got it out and it was gone and she felt better. And I debriefed the little group. I said, well, in IFS, we call those unattached burdens. You don't see them that much, but, they do happen. And then I went to the staff meeting and my body got really cold and I couldn't get warm. I was shaking, even with a blanket. And the rest of the staff started teasing me, calling Bob the Ghostbuster. And I sort of lost it. I acted like a jerk. I was sort of snarling at everybody. It wasn't a pretty scene. And then I thought, I'm just going to forget about this, just some weird one-time thing. Yeah, I don't want to look at that stuff. But then this was the end of the training. Then this lady started sending me these long emails from the airport. One of them was, I can sense the God in every, I'm seeing colors I've never seen before. And I thought, oh no, I've triggered a manic episode. Big trouble. And she kept saying, and then she sent me another one. Oh, Bob, I didn't tell you this, but when I was young, I tried to kill myself many times and was hospitalized many times. And now I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? This is bad news. And then she sent me an email that changed my life direction. She said, Bob, back then, I tried to tell people about the non-human inside of me. They gave me electroshock, put me in a straitjacket, and injected me full of horrible drugs. You're the first human being to ever believe me, and you've changed my life. I went, I can't ignore this. No, I can't, no, I can't. And I followed her for the 10, 15 years since then, and she has flowered. She had a fairly good life, but she, it really got all a lot better in a lot of ways. And so because I asked a lot of people, have you ever dealt with this, and expressed interest? Nobody else wants to deal with this. It's weird. It's goofy. People make fun of you. Can be scary and unpleasant. So I got a lot of referrals. Because give it to Bob. Bob will take that, which was actually really good for me in terms of learning. And that was the origin of the more than 10 years of research that went into that book I did on this subject.
But I've had a great conversation, even with the little internet hiccups. It's been quite a pleasure to speak with you. A lot of confirmation of things I've experienced or witnessed or learned about. And your work's really valuable, man. And I'm glad to have your book in my library.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot my promotion genes don't work. I have a new book out, another one. When you're going through hell, keep going.
All right.
And it's a book of quotations and short stories that I use in therapy, and they're all about the connection between healing and spirit, which is more and more the area I want to live in.
My mentor in the Biofield toning work, she gave me that exact advice in terms of how to help clients along, that maybe the session did some healing, but that healing instigated a type of crisis or agitation. It's particularly with stuck emotional energy. When you uncork the energy or like tear down the wall that's been repressing their sadness or grief or loss, well, I didn't know this early in my practice so much, but they're going to go through those feelings, and their mind is going, like some part of their mind is going to try to attach those feelings to a reason why they're there. And usually the reason that the mind comes up with is, well, it's because I suck.
Yeah.
But going through hell, keep going. Treat the emotion as just something to witness. It's a temporary thing. Don't give it any story. Just let it happen. Write it out. I think that's, that phrase is crucial. Going through hell, keep going. So I'll have to check that book out too.
Okay. Great talking to you, Chance.
Thanks, Bob. Everybody for listening. Thank you. And catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to my conversation with Robert Falconer. Cool last name. Must be nice. I first heard about Bob's work through my favorite podcast to listen to for the last 10 plus years, Mysterious Universe. See, I've got the mug. So if you go find in the recent archives, I don't remember what episode, but there was one where they discussed Bob's book, which is worth listening to because they are able to talk about cases that we don't get into here. I mean, it's a 600 plus page book, which does leave potentially the opportunity to revisit this material. But at the very least, as somebody that does a type of energy work myself, it's one that I'm happy to have in my library to reference whenever maybe I just have the need to have a different approach to this multiplicity of selves within a person. And I'd love to talk more about that, and I will. So first, let's get the business out of the way. if you want to hear part 2 of the conversation, the Plus extension, you're going to get on Patreon or use the YouTube membership function or join me on Rockfin. All of these ways are always linked in the show notes. So pop over to the description, find the link, use whichever way seems best for you to become a member, a supporter of the podcast, and I appreciate you, business. Thank you for joining. And I hope you enjoy part 2, where we talk about, first of all, how discussing the whole topic of unattached burdens or spirit possession is totally necessary, that we also bring into the conversation the navigation away from blame, and how blame and possession go hand in hand. And even if you remove a type of possession or unattached burden that is not really part of your own system or should be there, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there to just start doing some blaming, blame the entity, blame the situation, and revoke your own responsibility. So getting away from that is super important, especially if you are somebody that has dealt with this type of attachment and needed to get rid of it. I also think it's important to know that maybe this isn't as common as it looks or sounds. I just wouldn't jump to it right away as an explanation for why you're having a hard time. Always bringing things back to free will. And I think that if there was really something like an attachment or possession going on, you would definitely know. But that's my opinion. We discussed our demons, or these possessing spirits, really deceased humans. Big topic of conversation. Very interesting thing to consider. We discussed shamanism and positive possessions. Maybe needs a different word for that. Invocation, perhaps, something like that, or channeling. How to tell the benevolent entities from the malefic. Big question. This one I always like to get into when we're on this subject matter. The corporate hierarchy of the demonic entities, Demon Corp, as above, so below. The government of demonic employment. We discussed the basics for dealing with attachments, how IFS, internal family systems, healed Bob from going blind. He was on the way to going blind and he resolved it in the psychic realm. Super interesting. And we talked about what Bob thinks about psychiatric meds. All that and more in the Plus extension. It's a good one. Now, why I like to have talks like this is because it seems like IFS is effective. I haven't tried it very much myself. We did have an episode with Michaela Crandall last year sometime where we were introduced to the topic. And she was also a Biofield tuner, which is cool. We really focused on the synergy between those things. And just like there's a bunch of different systems of astrology, or you could do astrology and human design and the gene keys and the I Ching and see like different layers or lenses to look at the same thing, which is the universal pattern. I think that applies when we're looking at mind from the part-spaced perspective. So in terms of entities or also alternate personalities in our minds that are versions of us or aspects of us, the part of me that does this or protects me from that. I think that there's a correlation to the biofield big time, because the biofield is our mental energy. It's our electromagnetic field. It's our aura. Our memory is in there. The flow of our thoughts, our emotions, all of that is part of the biofield. So when it comes to considering parts of ourself, we already have that model with chakras or with just biofield energy. Now, what would cause something to become a totally split off and separate personality to the point of seeming like an entity or, an alternate self or a disassociated psychic self? The stuck energy in the biofield model is a good descriptor of that, because if your life force energy is your consciousness, and those two things are synonymous, the more coherent your life force energy, the more consciousness you have. So it's reasonable to think that those things go together. Then if you have a compartmentalized chunk of it and it's really blocked off, walled off, and isolated, it's going to manifest as if it's another person inside of you, another mind inside of you. I think that that's legit how it works and what's going on. Okay, funny face over. I had to sneeze. At least I hit the mute button. Anyway, I like to have the different lenses to consider these things through at the same time without being too attached to one. Of course, I'm attached to the biofield anatomy because that's what I practice, but I'm always looking to bolt on other perspectives to what I'm doing so that I have more tools in the kit for approaching particular situations. And things like Tom Zinser's Soul-Centered Healing. Go back and find that episode, Tom Zinser with a Z. Really good one to pair with this conversation. And of course, the IFS stuff and other ways of looking at our life force energy or our mental realm in a part-space model. You utilize those. And sometimes I have to come across what you call an ego state. Somebody else's, like somebody's other self, or like a compartmentalized, psychically split off 4-year-old version of them or 10-year-old version of them. Sometimes we got to work with them and respect them as if they're really an alternate person inside of the client. And that helps and that works. There is something to it. Whether this is all just different languages for communicating with the intelligence of our bodies or our souls or our higher selves or what, or whether it's literally somehow true. I don't think there's a physicality to it, but we are talking about the psychic realm, which is, it doesn't have to have physicality to be experientially real, right? Like your dreams they feel real until you come back here. And what's real other than experience? So all that stuff is in the mix. It's on my mind. And always looking to expand the number of lenses through which I can comprehend this stuff and try to synthesize them together. And I think this conversation was a good example of that. I'm glad you guys were along for the ride. If you want to get a Biofield tuning with me, you can email me, chance@innerversepodcast.com, or check the show notes for the sound healing link. You'll see it. It's very obvious, where you can find more information about booking a session or what to expect with a session, what it entails, videos with me explaining the process and the philosophy behind it, which is useful just for your own edification, even if you're not going to get a session. Be aware we're running at about 6 weeks out right now in terms of booking. And that means the sooner that you get scheduled with me, the sooner your tuning is going to happen. I wish I could do more and faster, but that's just how it's got to be for them to be effective and authentic, I guess is the word. So yeah, not to do high pressure sales, but there is a wait. And that's hopefully just a reflection on them being good, because I'm noticing more and more that I think we're at about 3/4 of my sessions are with repeat clients. And that's not to say that like it's the type of business model to keep you sick so that you come back for more over and over again. It's just that there's layers and there's other things to work on, and there's new challenges as you resolve old challenges. And clients seem to think most of the time that what we do together is helpful, and they come back for another one. And now most of my sessions are with a returning client, which I think is cool. So if you're new to it, come find out what it's all about. Enjoy the party trick of pulling memories out of the ether and figuring out how they affect your psychic configuration and rectifying anything that's limiting to your potential. That's a lot of fun. There's a lot of other ways to support the show, more than I can remember off the top of my head, but I'll try. First of all is Tippecanoe Herbs. My first and foremost, my favorite people to affiliate with, Kyle Denton, the herbal master, wizard extraordinaire, fairy speaker, tincture maker, potion preparer. Love that guy. Thank you, Kyle. If you use the InnerVerse coupon code, 10% off, and I get a kickback and you get a nice tincture. I love everything I get from them, and it's all high quality stuff. And now we have a brand new affiliate, Lotus Way, which you should just go through the either lotusway.com/InnerVerse or use the link that's in the episode description at the bottom of every page. And you'll be able to browse through my affiliate link, and that's a nice way to give me some kickback too. And I want to say thank you to all the people after Katie Hess's episode 2 weeks ago who have gone through my affiliate link and made some purchases of powerful radical flower elixirs and other types of products from Katie. Appreciate that a lot. If you would not mind joining the Telegram group, that's going to be linked in the show notes as well. Anybody should join that likes the show. But if you've been buying Lotus Way stuff, I would love it if you could jump in Telegram and tell us your experience with the products, because I have only tried one so far. I've got more coming. And I want to make sure I'm promoting something that I fully understand the ins and outs of, or the effects of, or how people like it. Right now I have a high level of trust for it. And I love talking to Katie, but I just want more data so that I know what to say about this affiliation or to continue it. I think that we'll continue it. It seems like a really good one. But anyway, join the Telegram if you want to join a heady community of like-minded people, a self-regulating, no trolls ever, easy to learn from, easy to ask questions place. Really, really fun. Love the Telegram chat. Thank you guys for keeping it lit, even when I don't participate that much, especially this last week as I was on vacation. So welcome back, everyone, to the channel. Took a week off, met my in-laws for the first time, had a lot of fun, and life is good. So much to look forward to on the calendar of upcoming shows. So thanks for being here. Oh, other ways to support the podcast. We'll just leave it at that. If you explore the episode notes, you'll see that there are other ways beyond the ones I just said, but Tippecanoe Herbs and Lotus Way are great ways. I think I'm going to get out of here. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this very unique conversation with Robert Falconer, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Be good, everybody. Bye-bye.